I am Erin Patten, metaphysical master in a millennial age, and it is my life's purpose to guide you and organizations along an enlightened path. So I invite you to sit comfortably and tune in as I welcome you to the MetaBusiness Millennial, where we get the real conversations you won't get in the boardroom so that we understand this is exactly the path we need to be on in order to grow, evolve, and thrive. Greetings, I am Erin Patten, also known as Master L, and welcome to the MetaBusiness Millennial Podcast. Today, I am joined with the guest of honor, I have to say, because I haven't had a guest on this show in nearly a year. So y'all know she got to be good to be on this show. And I met her through a mutual friend in an organization that I belong to called the Human Gathering. And it was literally like love at first sight. So I'm really honored and really grateful to have Niki join us here on the show. Welcome, Niki.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Erin.
Well, like I said before, I'm so grateful to have you here and to also have you talk about who you are. And let's just start very simply with that. And I know it's a big question and, it can go many different ways, but I really would like for you to just briefly tell us about who you are, where you come from, and in many ways, how it brought you to where you are today.
Okay, well, That's a great question. Who am I? I think first and foremost, I'm a really curious being. And I think I've gotten to all the places that I've gotten to through the mindset of curiosity. I found that curiosity has taken me farther than any mindset possibly could. But for background, I grew up in a white middle class family in Canada. I think one of the greatest privileges I've had in this life is being raised in a home that's filled with unconditional love. That's like sort of marker for me as far as all of the blocks that I had to uncover to grow into the woman I am today. Growing up, it was filled with love. I never had to worry about food on the table. We always had a roof over our head. My dad was a teacher. My mom was a nurse, and we were right in the middle. So we got to see both sides of the spectrum, the upper class. I don't know if the lower class is okay to say, but growing up in the middle gives you a pretty broad perspective of life. And it wasn't until much later that I realized how fortunate that was to have that upbringing.
And as you talk about sort of being in the middle and observing the various, the upper and the other, groups of folks, how did that impact you from a curiosity perspective? Because you were saying you were curious. So was it like through your schools or like, how did it, bring you into, I guess, this path of healing, if you will?
Yeah. So I think one thing about being in the middle, I didn't appreciate it until I was much older, because being in the middle growing up, I was like, this is complacency. This is boring. Just get me as far away from here as I possibly can. So after 7 years of university, I reached a crossroads. And the crossroads at the time felt very dramatic. I think I was 26 or 27 at the time. And I remember thinking very clearly that I had to start living. The question was this: am I going to live the rest of my life by my rules or by everybody else's? Because I was offered a job almost straight out of university. All my classmates told me I was crazy for not taking it. Of course, my parents wanted me to take the job. That's what you do. And it was what was expected of me. And the thought of going from kindergarten through 7 years of university and then straight into a teaching job for potentially another 55 years was making me feel like I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I was having blackout spells. My body started shutting down. It was all the signs were there. My body was like frozen and compressed and fearful and panicky at the idea of starting a career without at least giving myself one window, 1 year to go out and see what else life had to offer me. So I remember very clearly saying, okay, it's me. It's go time. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing what I want to do. And I got on a plane and I flew all the way over to Australia, which is as far as away as I could get from Winnipeg, Manitoba. And that's where the real shift happened. And the first stake in the ground was choosing me. And that choice of choosing me to be the designer, the creator of my own reality, was where all of the magic started to reveal itself to me. And it was 5 years ago.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that, because that's oftentimes my very next question is like, what is the catalyst that gets you to that awakening point, if you will? And you didn't quite allude to an awakening per se, but you really were talking about the struggle, the internal struggle, the physical manifestation of that internal struggle in your blackouts, in the anxiety. And certainly that's something that so many people experience, whether it's at the beginning of their spiritual journey, in the middle, and there's so many manifestations of this struggle. And the key point through it all is, you said, I choose me. And by choosing you, it wasn't like anything necessarily selfish per se, but it was like, I want to choose me and make a decision that comes from me, is aligned with me, and not someone else's expectation of me. And so, of course, like, I want to know what comes next. So when you had that year, that sort of gap year, what happened there? And then how did that evolve? Because you said that was, what, 25 years ago? Did I get that right?
One now, and I graduated at 26. So yeah, it's like 25 years ago.
Okay.
So, well, I mean, I think that crossroads where I made the choice to pivot towards my own self-reliance and trusting myself to follow what my heart was telling me, to follow what I felt was the most liberating inside of my body, to take a giant leap of faith, has taught me again. I've taken so many leaps of faith in my life because of that 1 year. Landed in Australia, and I never really came back, in the sense that I fell off the grid. I fell in love with a surfer. I lived in a 1969 Valiant for 10 months with 4 surfboards on the roof. I had very little money. I was busking, playing guitar, fire dancing for money. And I felt like a queen living in a car. And the message that dropped in with that specific gap year was, the less you have, the less you need. And I felt like royalty living in a car. I had nothing to manage. For me, it was also the lesson of time being the greatest luxury that we have. And how do we want to spend it, right? How do we want to spend our dollars? How do we want to spend our time? So it was a shoestring budget, but it was a very miraculous unfolding into this new version of myself that was free. And that felt sovereign. It was my first taste of sovereignty. And I think that's what we're all kind of striving for in this lifetime, is how do we become sovereign beings in a system that's not necessarily designed for us to feel free within?
I love that you started to articulate it in that way, particularly using the word sovereign, because that's not something that we often hear, period. We learn it as like a sovereign nation, or we hear it more politically, but we don't hear it necessarily as it relates to the individual, particularly the divine individual, the spiritual individual. And that sovereignty that you speak of, to me, is something that is priceless. So when you talk about like living in the car, like not having any money, it didn't matter, because like you said, you had that freedom of expression in your sovereignty, that sovereignty of expression. And of course, our listeners are like, Erin, Niki, y'all are so cute with your little stories and not having any money and being sovereign, but we got to make money. Okay. Like, you can do that when you're cute in your 20s, but I'm grown and it's not cute. So really, I want us to already get there, because I'm ready for it. But I just really am interested in delving more deeply into this sovereign beingness, if you will, and making money and experiencing abundance, and what that looks like for you. And I'm going to go ahead and just spill the beans, because we did do a little precursor work before this call, and we really talked about, like, when we started doing this work, how it did not feel like work. And I want you to tell that story again here, and maybe it's a fast forward, maybe it's a cliff notes from that moment to the not feeling like work. But I really want to start getting into that part as well.
Sure. Well, to give a Cole's note to get us up to speed. So imagine I leave the university, I land in Australia, I find my freedom, my sovereignty, and then I got a thirst for travel, I got a thirst for awe, I got a thirst for searching for wisdom in different pockets of the world. And so I really did travel for a very long time. And then I reached a point where I thought, okay, I've been following my whims. I've been doing whatever I want, whenever I want to. And I had a contract with the universe, we'll call it. And for the sake of this conversation, I said, okay, put me where I need it the most. I'm ready to be of service. And, a month after that conversation, I was asked to create a school for at-risk youth. And for 10 years, I had written my own curriculum, designed from the paint on the walls to the library to the technology that we use. And I worked with kids who were taken from their homes with Child and Family Services. And I was their teacher. And after 10 years of working with these kids and realizing, they were absolutely some of the greatest teachers that I've ever had, because one of the things they taught me was that without a willingness, there is no way, right? So I was working with these kids, but they didn't really want to be there. I had the good job in the sense that they liked me. We got to do, we got to make stuff up and have a good time, but you can't help someone that's not willing to help themselves. And so from that, I realized how willingness is so key. And I took a leap of faith after that 10 years was up, and I said, I'm going to go and try and get a dream life in Mexico. I want to host retreats called As You Wish, because if people are showing up because they want to find transformation, because they're willing to put the work in, now we can get some shit done. Now I'm ready. Let's go. So I took a leap of faith out of that 10-year teaching job, and I've never really looked back in the sense that I don't feel like I've worked a day since then. I just decided that I wanted to do what was going to make me happy and be of service in a way that was servicing me at the same time as I was able to service my community, as I was able to service consciousness and creation as a whole.
Mm. Thank you so much for that, because I know that there are so many people out there who are like us and who want to serve. And I've said this on previous podcasts, probably exactly the same way. And one thing that is, there couldn't be anything more painful as someone who is in that position than serving folks that don't want to be helped, or actually don't want to help themselves. I think that's the point you're trying to make, the willingness to help themselves. And it's interesting because, oftentimes people are like, pray for me, girl, pray for me. But it's like, yeah, I can pray for you, but at the end of the day, you got to do the work, and you have to want what you desire, what you want in these prayers. And so the willingness to see it manifest and actualize for you. And that word willingness is so powerful, because even in my Tai Chi practice, there was even a game where we were like, willingness and means, like resources, like how many resources do you need to get this done, and the willingness, and it actually doesn't even matter how many resources you have. If your willingness is 100%, the resources will show up,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's part of the sovereignty, right? So when you realize that you are the sovereign creator of your reality, and you have a willingness to design a reality that's going to create more joy for you, everything you need will line up to suit that. And I know this from myself. I've taken so many leaps where I made a commitment to myself at one point to never make a decision based on money. And it's a wildly unrational thing to do, but it works every time. I'd have negative 500 in the bank account. I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go to Mexico in February, and I'm going to, I'm just like, I'm still doing this. I don't care. I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And it's miraculous how things will fall into place, because if you have momentum, shit's going to get done. If you jump off a cliff, right? If you're taking that leap of faith with your heart wide open and your willingness present and your sovereign being in check, when you start to fall, the momentum that you get from that leap warps everything around you. So it's not even a matter of becoming a manifestor. It's a matter of becoming so magnetic that everything you need will fall into place, and you hit the bullseye every time. And if you don't, like, pretty damn close. And what I've noticed is in my own path that every time I've taken a wild leap of faith, like quitting a job or changing homes or whatever it is, I find risk taking is greatly rewarded, and I've never regretted it. I think we regret the things we don't do, or we feel we're being called to do, but we don't have the willingness because we're too scared to take that risk. I think
Yes.
that's ourselves.
Yes. I love that you said that, because there is a reward in the risk taking. And there absolutely, I mean, when you talk about the negative 500 in your account, but you're still booking the ticket to do this, that, this, and the other, that's absolutely what works for you. And works for you and can work for anyone. And I want you to get into the nitty-gritty details of that magnetism, because yes, we can encourage people to take these risks. Yes, we can encourage people to jump off the cliff. But if they're jumping off the cliff and then they're like, oh my, wait, like, then that momentum is going to be disrupted. And then the fall won't be as graceful. And then the bullseye target won't get hit. Actually, it'll be a splat. You know what I'm saying? If that.
Yeah. So there's, for me, I can speak from experience. There's little daily rituals that I like to do that help me stay in tune or attuned with my magnetic grace. So free will is what every human is born with. And when you recognize you have free will, that's when you start to things get really fun, and you start to create things from that free will. And you can recognize with enough experience that, oh shit, maybe we are really limitless beings and we have limitless potential. But there's a manifestation that comes with free will, right? You start manifesting. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I want this. I want that. I want this. When we evolve a little more and we align with our divine will, that's when we start to remember that we're magnetic beings. And so the hustle actually ceases altogether. And it's kind of like we get to sit back and draw in what our destiny is. And our destiny is just a promise that we made to ourselves before we landed into these human forms. And it's the most natural thing in the world for our destiny to unfold. It's very natural. So my daily rituals are to wake up first thing in the morning, and I'll go outside always. First thing in the morning, natural sunlight on my eyes. It's going to help this technology that we call the human form to find a place of ease, right? So if you wake up and you look at your phone and the blue light is the first thing to hit the lens of your eye, that light is going to go into your body, and your metabolism is going to be like, I don't know what time it is. I don't know what she wants me to do. So now it's going into chaos, and now there's inflammation. So my ritual is get outside, not even through a window. This is coming from my friend Casey. Get outside, look at the sunlight. Now the circadian rhythms of the birds waking up and the sunlight through the trees, or the feet on the earth, right? My body says, oh, I know what to do. Let's go. It's time to start the day. Let's get my systems going. So I'm taking care of my vessel. Number one, you got to take care of the technology of your body so it can work for you in the right ways. Then I go into my good morning mornings, right? And I call in all of the guides that I work with, and I call in my own highest self. I call in the elements. So I work with like circles of what we could call magic, but it's really just connection, right? So we are physical beings and we are quantum beings. And the greatest secret or hack that I could hand someone today, the greatest key that I found in connecting to my divine will and staying connected to my magnetic power, is the simple act of putting out my hand, lifting my chin, and saying thank you. Thank you for all of the amazing opportunities you keep putting right in the palm of my hand. Thank you for making this easy. Thank you for ease in my abundance. Thank you for ease in my relationships. Thank you for ease on my path. Thank you for all of the beautiful surprises. And it is literally insane what keeps landing right in the palm of my hand. And I'm not even wiggling my pinky finger. It's like, oh, look at that. Oh, and I'm just here saying, thank you. Yes, thank you. Yes. So I don't know if it's a culmination of the 25 years of being on the path and being curious that has gotten to me to the place where I can really trust that. In fact, I don't know how to trust anything else but that, because I've seen how it works. But what I do know is that every single human is designed equally. Every single human has a quantum field of energy that they can access their own wisdom, their own teachings, and their own technologies from. So how do we start to merge the physical experience, with the quantum experience, to upgrade and up level all of the opportunities, all of the abundance, the prosperity, the health, optimal health, right? Well-being, relationships, whatever it is we're calling in, we can start accessing a multi-dimensional self to take all of this shit to the next level, to become that magnetic being, to stop hustling so hard. The hamster wheel has been invented to keep us distracted. I understand what it's like to have one paycheck and 10 bills. And that one paycheck the number doesn't change every 2 weeks. It's the same number. And you're looking at the bills and you're looking at the number on the check and the bills. And it's like, well, damn, I mean, how is this going to work? So if you're stuck in that space, I understand. I've been there. I totally understand that is reality for more than probably 80% of our population, right? But I recently heard a story, and I'm going to bring this up because it's really interesting. I just had lunch yesterday with a friend her good friend was in that situation. He'd been working hard his whole life. He wanted to be rich. That was his thing. He wanted to get money, and he was, hustling. He's like, this isn't working. And so he decided randomly to quit his job. And he thought, I'm going to do something that I find interesting, that not a lot of people are doing, and I'm going to see where it takes me. So he took a course in meteorites. He learned to identify them. He learned how to study them. He learned how to locate them. In 6 months, he found the world's largest meteorite that's worth millions of dollars, that has been certified by a university in Edmonton, and it's sitting in the back of his pickup truck. All because he was like, oh, there's got to be another way. He was curious, he took a risk, and he went for it. So what's holding you back, I guess, is the question. And what limits have you put upon yourself that you're not seeing, that your ceiling is there because you put it there, and society has put it there, and maybe your parents and your culture and all those things. But how do we start getting curious enough to poke and be like, well, wait a minute, is that a real limitation? Is that a belief system? Is that a thought system? Like, can I pierce through that? Like, is this serving me? Do I really even need this? Is this making me feel safe? Because it's probably just an illusion of safety, right? So how do I pierce through everything that feels limiting to start accessing my unlimited potential, to start accessing my multidimensional realities, to start accessing my divine right to be a magnetic sovereign being of creation?
100 fucking percent. She got the gold stars. I mean, and that's it, people. And I think that the curiosity is the key, and the questioning, the line of questioning you ask yourself in. And I'm so glad that she shared her story, and I'm happy to share a little bit about mine too in that journey, because it doesn't always happen overnight for some people. Like, I feel like the example she gave of the guy, oh my God, like, I used to hear things like that, particularly from Abraham Hicks, and be like, where's my millions of dollars in my bank account? Everyone's path is different. And who knows how old that guy was? Who knows what his soul evolution journey is? Who knows those things? But it is a beautiful example of what could happen for you. And the key is that you have to continue to have that curious mind and that openness and that ability to receive that which is yours. And I feel like that's what happened for this guy. And the same can happen for you, and the same has happened for me. I dedicated myself to this path way more than 6 months ago, more like 7, 8 years ago. And I feel like I'm just now getting into that place of juicy, yummy alignment that Niki's speaking of. And I had a lot to clear. I'm a Black woman in 2024. Like, I have my DNA, I have my lineage shit, I have my generational shit, I have my trauma, I have my lifetime trauma, I have my past lifetime trauma. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on, and so everyone's path is going to look different, and especially based on what your soul's evolutionary journey is. And so you have to be able to have that acceptance of self and that patience with yourself as you're doing these things that Niki speaks to. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with the receiving, right? Because there's a very clear difference between asking for something and receiving something. So we are actually technologies of receive. We're sending and receiving signals all the time, but it's the ability soften and receive what is already yours, where things really start to change. And you can't, the magnetic being that we're talking about is a receiver. So how do you learn how to receive, right? What parts of you aren't feeling worthy of receiving? There are lines of questioning. And I think questioning and contemplation are two very cool daily tips that you can take with you, in the sense of, most people don't meditate. I don't meditate. I find it boring, but I love contemplation. So I will take moments in my day to do nothing. I don't have my phone. I don't have any distractions. If I can be outside, fantastic. But maybe it's 3 minutes where I'll just sit and be like, and I'll check in with myself. Okay, where are we at, Niki? What messages do you have for me? What am I not hearing? Right? Maybe it's just listening to the wind, listening to the trees, listening to creation. It's just moments of contemplation, because if we don't have this space to stop and listen every once in a while, to stop in and check in with ourselves, then we don't have the space to receive what's coming our way. If we are constantly filled with distractions and excess consumption of data, we don't even have the room or the rivers at the pockets in our body to receive the magnetic divine grace that wants to be a part of us. So it's interesting in the sense that the difference between asking and receiving, if you think you have to pray for your spirit to come and be a part of your existence, it's not the case, in the sense that your spirit, you are your spirit trying to have a human experience. Your spirit's like, let me in. I asked for a body. I wanted a body. I'm going to come back to being a spirit. Let me in while I have a chance to smell things and taste things and fuck things and drink things and be things and feel things and all the things, right? It's like the human experience is the jackpot for your spirit. So you don't have to ask and hope that maybe one day your spirit will show up. You got to get the hell out of your way to receive it. Him, her, it, whatever, right? How do you create space to receive your quantum body, your spiritual body, your conscious body, whatever word you're comfortable with? You've got to take time for contemplations. Move the body, sweat, cry, yell, scream, shake, dance, swim, move energy through the body. We consume so much data right now, Erin, that we have an epidemic of anxiety because of the amount of information that we're trying to consume. So if we think about scrolling through a telephone and all of the information that's hitting the retina, that the information's going into the body, and the human mind is trying to keep up with the scrolling to process the emotions and the information and the data that's coming in at faster speeds than ever before, we actually don't have the evolutionary chip to process that as fast as we're intaking it. And that's not just the phone. As you're driving down the car, you've got advertisements, billboards, stop signs, license plates. There's just so much data coming in all the time. So if we don't ground and create space in our body, we read that excess data as electricity, because we are electrical beings. So the electricity in our body gets fried. We start to feel anxious, ungrounded, tense, and now the mind is going super fast because it's really just doing its job, trying to keep up, right? So to reduce anxiety, to create space in the body, to align with the voice that is yours and not all of the multiple voices you find on Google or social media, to find your voice, to embody with your spirit, to ground with your truth, requires moments of nothingness, moments of contemplation, moments of grounding, your own version of a ritual. How do you create the space to receive your destiny, to receive your divine truth and divine nature?
That is such a word, because for me, spaciousness was an activity or a state of being that eluded me. And it was just, as you spoke to, because of my severe anxiety and my severe level of fear that I carried in my body and my being. And I'm saying all this so that people out there listening can know that you are not alone in being like, Niki, like, what do you mean just sit and do nothing? I got so much shit to do. Like, I can't just do nothing. And that is a state of a trauma state, essentially. This constant busyness. And it's interesting because on a recent podcast episode, I titled it, "Are You Working Yourself to Death?" And there is one letter difference between business and busyness. And I figured that out because I was just typing it out and I spelled it wrong. And I was spelling busyness and I spelled business. And what a moment of awakening for me that was, that business and busyness are in many ways one and the same in this day and time. And one of the reasons why I even created the term meta business is that we have to go beyond the busyness. We have to go beyond the business. And that is the space. That's just space. When you go beyond the physical, and it's interesting because we're talking about being in the body and at the same time accessing what's outside of the body. And that's what happens when you're doing the spaciousness work and what the spirit is so capable of doing at the same damn time. Yet we're not allowing that, doing that beingness of the spaciousness. So I see you getting excited. Jump in.
I mean, it's just what everything you're saying is true. And it really is an invitation for the idea of accessing the quantum field or accessing your spirit. It's like, we don't have to access it. We are it. So how do we invite ourselves to soften into that truth? It's like an invitation. It's a receiving. It's an allowing. It's an uncovering of the blocks, right? The trauma blocks, the generational blocks, the ancestral blocks, the social paradigm blocks. How do we start melting through those blocks to create more spaciousness, to allow our spirit to shine forth in our business, in our relationships, in our bedrooms, wherever we are, right? So there's nothing that we can do throughout our entire existence where our spirit will be like, well, she lost her chance. I guess we're just going to go, forget it, like you're on your own now. That's never going to happen. Your spirit's like, put me in, coach, put me in, coach, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, I'm here. Are you listening? Can you hear me? And it's like, if we can't quite hear it, it's because we're not trusting those tiny little voices. So we're very busy. We're not hearing the subtleties. We're not following the intuition. We're not listening to our own calling, right? And when you hear the calling, you have to pick up the damn phone or it's going to stop ringing so loud. And then you have to really try and find it. So I always say, if you don't hear the universe when it's screaming at you, you're never going to hear it when it whispers. If you don't hear your spirit when it's screaming at you, you're never going to hear it when it whispers. So you got to allow yourself these moments where you trust your body, where you trust your heart, where you follow something that is completely irrational, but feels right in your body. And you don't need to justify it. You don't need to explain it away. You just got to trust it sometimes. And sometimes it's as simple as finding a little thread of joy that just makes you happy. So one of the ways I landed in my dream life in Mexico is I tugged on a thread of joy that was, I want to be a dancer. Like, if I'm going to be real with myself and I'm going to be, if I'm going to take the time in my contemplations, nobody else is listening. Nobody listens to my contemplations. They're between me and me, right? So I get to think whatever the fuck I want. I get to say whatever I want. It's between me and me, right? Yeah. Be honest. I get to be real. I get to be vulnerable. Okay, Niki, what do you really want to do? Like, if you could do anything, what would you really want to do? Like, let's keep peeling back the onion because I want to hear the truth from you. I really want to know if it's anything, what is it? And the little voice said, I want to be a dancer. 44-year-old Niki started laughing. I'm like, okay, like let's figure that out, right? I got nothing to lose. This is, after I'd quit my job to try and find my dream life in Mexico. I want to be a dancer. So I went through the Rolodex of my experiences and I was like, oh, I remember when I was on that beach dancing to that DJ set. I think that DJ has a festival in November. I wonder if he needs any dancers for his festival. Track down his number. Hi, it's Niki from Canada. I don't know if you're going to remember me. Back in May, I was dancing at your party, send him the information. Messages me right back. Nikita, of course I remember you. I have something I need to talk to you about. He was an Italian man named Filippo. And from that one little thread of like, well, if I'm being real with myself, this is what brings me the most joy. So if I'm telling people that they have to, do what they love, then walk the talk. Like, what do you love? Like, what's going to bring you the most joy? What's going to put you in the pocket of your own bliss? And it was that. And so from that one thread, you know, that conversation that I ended up having with a DJ named 𝗘𝗶𝘃𝗶𝘀𝗀, who became my mentor and one of my dearest friends, he teleported me and my entire family to a place called 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀𝗃𝗃, Mexico, to create an experience for a festival called 𝗚ndalinda that we called 𝗘𝗵𝟗. And 𝗘𝗵𝟗 was the largest magic circle in modern history. And we opened up portals of information for high realms of spirit to come through. I didn't get paid to be a dancer, but I followed my joy. Get the gig of a lifetime.
I love that, because so often we beat ourselves up for having these what feel like childish desires and dreams. And how often did we hear our parents or our teachers or our friends laugh at us, tell us that you can't make money doing that shit. You can't do that. Those are likely the very things that are going to ascend you. Like, those are the very things that your soul came here to experience, to Niki's point. And unfortunately, this is just how this realm is set up. Like, it seems like the things that you deeply desire get smashed down and abused the most. But it's almost, you call that forth because your soul wants to know if you really even want it. Do you even want it that badly? And sometimes, and I have this as my own personal story, like, there's so many things that I desire in this life. Artistic expression, one of them, fashion being another, luxury experiences, all of these things that, require, a lot of resources. And right now I'm doing podcasts, speaking, all these things. And it's just like, Erin, how are you on a yacht in Cartagena? You know what I'm saying? Like, but these are experiences that my soul call forth, because this is something that I find so yummy and delicious and fulfilling for me and my soul. And it's going to look different for you. And these are things that I saw for myself when I was a little girl. So I really can't even explain it to you. This is just something that I just deeply desired. Same with Niki and her dancing and opening up portals. Like, it wasn't necessarily monetary payment, but to open up portals like that, that's an abundance that's soul fulfilling, literally. Like, this is something that your soul needed to get to its next level. So money can't even buy you those experiences. So I really want the listeners to start to take this part in around the money piece, the payment piece, the dreams, the desires, and how to reconcile all of these things as you're walking your human, mundane life, because I know, like, you got to pay the bills, you got the kids, you got the mama, you got the things pulling you this way, but also listening to that voice that you speak of, that whisper, that yelling that's coming from your soul. And how do you still tend to that piece? And maybe you can speak to that a bit more as well.
Well, I think tending to that piece is what I was sort of scratching at about the rituals and finding what works.
Yeah.
It takes courage, right? It takes a lot of courage to trust yourself. And this idea of this matrix that we're all living in, that's very conforming and very constricting, the invitation is to bust the fuck out of it. Like, you're a goddamn superhero and not look back and that. So how do you get to that point where you're like, wait a minute, did I really sign up? Did my spirit really come from an infinite source of creation, an infinite source of wellness, an infinite source of abundance, to come here and be confined in this minuscule experience that feels like I'm choking and I'm treading water, just trying to keep my head up, just to keep my head above the surface, right? Like, so there's got to be a point on everyone's personal journey where the compression gets so intense, it's like squeezing a diamond coming out, right? Where it's like, oh my God. But the wish is that we don't have to get sick before that happens, or we don't have to hit rock bottom, which I've done several times to make that happen, right? Like, how can we get curious enough and courageous enough to receive everything that is ours in a day-to-day way where, one, let's try, when I said, I followed my joy to be a dancer, but I didn't get paid to dance. I got paid to do the experience that I did, but I wasn't dancing. I was choreographing. I was a choreographer for 100 dancers, right? So it's like, the invitation is to know that when you start doing the things you love, it leads to doors open because your frequency is higher. I'd like to learn how to do pottery. Okay, don't quit your job to become a potter. Go to a fucking pottery class and see who you meet there. What happens when every Thursday you start doing pottery, working with your hands in the clay, and you leave that studio feeling different? You feel like, I did something I wanted to do. This brought me joy. This uplifts me. This connects me to myself in a new way. Oh, that level, that frequency, that vibration that you're leaving the pottery studio with. Oh my God, George, I haven't seen you in forever. You're reaching for the door. Oh, you have an opportunity? Oh, well, what is it, right? It's like, it's the frequency that we're looking for. So what can lift your frequency out of the compressed, mundane, fearful, anxious place to, oh my God, I feel like I can breathe. And it's you giving yourself permission to do things that are playful, to do things that are joyful, to do things that are not rational, that don't require a good or bad list, right? In the sense of like, well, what if I weigh out the goods and pros and cons of this? It's like, no. Just do it because you want to do it. Give yourself permission to do the things that make you excited. If you listen to your body, so imagine if you can't hear your intuition, most of us can still hear our bodies.
Yes.
So a way to do this. You sit still. You have, the invitation is to go to a friend's house for dinner. Do I want to go to this friend's house for dinner? I'm going to say yes and see how that feels in my body. Yes, I want to go. And then maybe the invitation feels like a compression or like like it feels heavy, stuck or dull or no, I don't want to go. Oh, that feels good. Okay, no, I'm not going for dinner. It doesn't feel good in my body. I don't want to go. I want time for myself. I want to sit home and contemplate that day. I'm not going because it will please that person, but it won't please me. Right? So if we start listening to our bodies, and please know that if you're going to start listening to your body and you feel all of these fluttery butterflies that might feel a little bit like anxiety, but there's a slight difference because getting excited over something and being scared shitless is like a hairline of difference. So butterflies are actually a yes. Like, I'm going to throw up. Oh my God, I'm going to throw up. That's actually a yes. Because now you're alive and maybe you're more alive than you've been for a while and you're feeling alive. And it's like, but it's the frozen, the compressed, the denser, if your body hunches or resists, that's a no. So start making yes or no questions to help you navigate your day-to-day invitations, opportunities, decision-making process. So you've got your body, you've got your intuition, you've got the invitation from yourself to start pushing through your own limitations, to start following your joy, to grab a little bit of courage to do something that maybe makes you feel uncomfortable or maybe makes you feel too seen or too heard, but you're stepping into that. There's a great difference between fear and danger. If you're not in danger and you're just afraid of something, please go do it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't because you're afraid. If you're in danger, don't do it. But if you're not doing it because you're afraid, but you're still going to be safe as a result, I tell this to my kid all the time. I made him get back on a horse. I'm like, honey, and I didn't make him. I let him decide. But it was like, there's a saying, you got to get back on the horse. You had a horrible experience with a horse. Here's your opportunity. I sent him to a horse camp. So he had all week without me present to make his own decision to get on the horse. But I said to him before he left the first day, I know how proud you will feel within yourself. You're not going to do this for me. It will be you feeling so proud of yourself for overcoming a fear. And that's the advice I gave him. And he got back on the horse. And sure enough, he was like lit. He did it. So please do things that terrify you if you're not in any danger, to start practicing those leaps of courage. And those fearful things can be really small. It could be raising your hand to speak in a staff meeting. It could be introducing yourself to a stranger at a bar. There's so many ways that we can start moving through fears to get the courage to start living the life of our dreams. So be brave.
I love all of that advice and I want to talk about the nuances of that too, because that is so perfect in terms of how we work through dis-ease. And I speak to this all the time in my work, like organizational disease, healing, and being able to listen to your body and know how to, I always say, notice, name, nurture those feelings. And she just walked through a beautiful example of particularly moving through fear. And sometimes there's moments too where we are just comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I want you to speak to this from your example too, because, and this is the best example I can come up with right now, but I would attract, like, for lack of better words, very horrible partners, put it lightly. Right now I just came back from court dealing with custody issues that's been ongoing for over 3 years. And I felt very safe in violent relationships. And that's something too that, happens as we're working through our trauma and we're healing, that we are oftentimes attract that which is unhealthy for us. So I would love to get your perspective on that and working through how to, come out of situations that likely aren't safe for us, but that may feel safe for us because of our past trauma.
Yeah, really good point, because we will often stay in really, sometimes dangerous and even violent situations, or suppressing or oppressive situations, because making a change is scarier than staying. And so imagine how many of us are frozen because we're afraid of change, afraid of the unknown. That's what it is. We are afraid of the unknown. So for me, I actually don't know if I have the best advice, because I'm afraid of complacency and mediocrity. I think that I like the idea of getting stuck somewhere is like, I can't breathe. It's like, I have to be on the leading edge of my own evolution. So the invitation that I'm sending is, how do we get to the leading edge of the unknown, right? So this is where the dance starts to get really interesting. Knowing, right, and trusting yourself to leave certain situations, job settings, relationships, right, to trust yourself to bring yourself forth, right, in a way that's vulnerable, in a way that is courageous, in a way that is, thrilling in some ways, because we don't know what's going to happen. But if you can get yourself to the leading edge, this is where the dance starts. Because if there is nothing in front of you, that's where it becomes anything. So another way to say that is, I know what my life has been up until this point, right? So I've got everything, quote unquote, behind me in this idea of a past. There is no past, there is no future, there's only now. And now,
Yeah.
so let's make that clear. There's actually no momentum to now. So if you're thinking you're going to make some change in the future, it ain't coming. There is no future. You cannot physically travel to the future or the past. There is only now. And now, I'll say it again, has no momentum. It's not even moving. So where do we think we're going, and when do we think we're going to get there, right? So when we're contemplating these ideas of how we want to move through uncomfortable situations, it's now. And it's only ever going to happen in the now. It can only happen in the now. All of your power that ever was and all of your power that ever will be is only here now. That's the only place it can exist. So if you can reclaim your power, I reclaim my power from this idea of the past. I reclaim my power from this idea of the future. I anchor my power into this moment of now to give me the courage to make a change, to take a leap into the unknown. Because when I get to the edge of the unknown, all of a sudden, if there's nothing in front of me, it's anything I want. And this is an interesting question. What do you want? We think we know what we want until we really get to the point where it's anything. And then it's like, oh, well, shit, what do I want? And also that questioning for yourself of what do I want is a great catalyst for change, because you might realize, oh, it's actually not what I thought it was. I actually thought I really wanted this, but now I got it and I don't want it. Or I'm very clear that I don't want what I'm in because I'm not flourishing here. This isn't nourishing. So desire, when it's born from a place of stillness, when you allow yourself moments of contemplation to really listen to your truest desires, and those desires are birthed from stillness, that is magnetism. When your desire is birthed from a place of stillness, it is already here. You don't even have time to snap your fingers because it can't live in the future. It can't live in the past. It can only be here now. And when you desire it, you also receive it. But the idea of true desire is different from want. Oh, I want a nicer car. I want a hotter guy. I want more money in my bank account. Let's start unpacking that. What is the real desire? I want freedom. I want peace. I want to be seen. I want to be held. What is the real desire underneath all of that? And how do we start fulfilling our own desires instead of putting these expectations and pressures on people around us to fulfill them for us? How do we take responsibility to our sovereign nature, right? Which includes all of the emotions. So then you can design your reality from that place of not relying on someone else to make you happy, right? There's a lot of power in that.
That's beautiful. And I think that that's a very nice closing to today's conversation, because we started with, or more or less started with, this idea of magnetism. And then we are certainly bookending it with that same aspect of magnetism, and really coming into oneself and asking that question, what do I want? Knowing very clearly that question will evolve with time as you come to know yourself better and more deeply in your spaciousness, in your moments of solitude or silence, that you will continually evolve all of these things. Because my answer to that question years ago, even 6 months ago, is different from it is today, and that's totally fine. So I love so much that you talked about all these topics, because our listeners are really gonna love all these juicy messages. And I just want you to leave us with some way that people can stay in touch with you, or if you have a beautiful offering that you want people to know about, particularly in Mexico or anywhere else, that'd be great.
Oh, so sweet. Well, website, it's NikiTrosky.com, NikiTrosky.com. You can always find me on social media. I just use Instagram. I'm on it pretty often, so you can find me there. Send me a message there. I do have online offerings. I have a series called Honey Pot, which is about how we can sort of connect the spiritual self to the human self in a way that's sort of juicy and delicious and quite feminine. I made that specifically for women. And yeah, I'll be back in Mexico in September. I am doing some offerings at Burning Man this year. I'm not sure when we're airing this, but yeah, I'll be back in 𝗘𝗍𝗄, Mexico, so you can also find me there.
Awesome. Well, Niki, it was such an honor, as I started with, to talk with you, to meet you, to be able to dive deeply with you in this episode of the MetaBusiness Millennial Podcast. And if you haven't already, I highly encourage you to follow me at I am Erin Patten across social media channels. Certainly like this video, share it with a friend, DM me, comment. I'd love to hear how you resonate with today's message. And until next episode, much love and light. Peace.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye. Did you really love this episode of the MetaBusiness Millennial Podcast? Well, I am honored, and I appreciate you subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends, because your feedback allows us to co-create more enlightened conversations. And if you're interested in growing your soul now, head over to my website, ErinPatten.com, to find all the show notes, links, and free resources to get your energy activated today. In the meantime, stay bright, my friends. Much love and light. Peace.